In this episode, I am going to be interviewing Rick Penn-Kraus. He is the last person who ever interviewed Steve McQueen. We're also going to be looking at a film that Steve McQueen starred in called The Getaway from 1972. This was directed by Sam Peckinpah, and it also starred Ali MacGraw, Ben Johnson, and Al Lettieri. Welcome to Robert Bellissimo at the Movies. This is a YouTube video podcast where I explore movies from all over the world with a guest and talk about how those stories were told on film, as well as interviews with various people who have worked in film, television, theater, amongst other things. And I want to welcome today Rick Penn-Kraus, who is the last person to ever interview the legend Steve McQueen. And then we're also going to be discussing The Getaway today. Rick, welcome. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you very much, Robert. A joy to be here and share this really fun story.
This is such a great story. I actually, when I saw you post about it on Facebook in a Steve McQueen group, I immediately knew where I had read it, and I know you've mentioned this book, the one by Marshall Terrell, and I read this book years ago. It's a great biography on McQueen, and he has the interview in the book, which is such a great. It's got such a sense of innocence, between you and McQueen, and with the whole crew around listening. So it's great that it's in this book. So if anyone ever wants to read it, you could read it in this great book here, Steve McQueen: Portrait of an American Rebel. But just looking at this story, so you're a high school student and they're filming The Hunter, which was McQueen's last film in your school. And but when you what made you want to interview him? Was it just because you thought it would be a great story, or was it because you had said you don't even think you had seen any of his films at that point? Is that right?
Well, I think I had seen some of his films. I definitely saw The Towering Inferno. That was one of the main ones that struck me. I knew he was a movie star. But this was not an interview that was planned. So I'll back up a little bit and kind of explain what happened. I was a high school student. I was a senior at Alexander Hamilton High School in West Los Angeles. And I was the editor-in-chief of the newspaper there, the school newspaper. So I had been on the track team and I had finished a workout, and I came back into the school after my workout, and I see all these movie trucks in the main quad area. So I thought, this is interesting. So I walk in and Steve McQueen walks right past me. And I thought, I blew it. I could have met him. I could have done something, and now he's gone in his truck or trailer or whatever, and I blew it. And so I kind of hid out in the bushes waiting for him to come out, and I shot a few pictures, which I don't think they've never been seen before. I don't know. Not the best pictures. I felt a little bit like a stalker. And then I thought, well, I need to find out what's going on here. So I went over to this group of guys that were over sitting out on some steps. And it was just from the crew, and it turned out to be one of the guys was Lauren James, who was the Steve McQueen stunt double. And I said, hey, what's going on here? And he said, oh, they're filming a movie with Steve McQueen. I said, oh, that's great, because I would love to interview him and take his picture for my high school newspaper. And Lauren says, okay, he never, ever lets anyone take his picture, and he never, ever gives interviews. And I said, oh, okay, thank you. And I walked away, and I see that Steve McQueen has just walked into the food truck, the inside where you can go in. So I follow him in, and it's just, this narrow corridor right inside the food truck. And it's just the two of us. And I said, excuse me, Mr. McQueen. And, I'm a high school student. What do I know? This is just pure naivete and just, anyway. So I said, excuse me, my name's Rick. I work at the school newspaper. Could I interview you and take your picture for our high school newspaper? And he says, sure. Yeah. go home, write some questions up, come back like around 6 o'clock. We'll still be here, and I'll answer your questions. I said, okay, thanks, and off I go.
Did he hesitate at all, or was it just sure right away?
No, no,
I love it.
he's like he's looking down. I still remember he's looking down at me and like, yeah, of course, sure, no problem. And it never even, with hindsight, with age and hindsight, I'm able to look at the whole thing with a different eye towards the meaning of it and what it was for him and for me and for young people, the kind of the message for young people generally who might be watching this. By young people, I mean even middle school age, high school age, or college or whatever, but especially younger. It never occurred to me that he would say no. It never occurred to me that I could fail in this task. All I knew was I'm with a newspaper, I'm at school, he's a celebrity. Of course you get an interview. How often does this opportunity come along? And again, with hindsight, we all have these opportunities that are around us everywhere, especially with the internet and everything else.
Oh yeah.
It's up to us to grab these opportunities. It doesn't just kind of get thrown at you and everything work out. You got to do something.
It doesn't hurt to ask, right?
Exactly, and that lesson is something that I've really taken to heart over many years. So I went home and sat at my family kitchen table at dinner time with my parents and my younger brother, and was writing up questions. And I don't think my parents had probably ever seen a movie of his, and I had seen maybe one, like I said, and I was looking for something to write on, and I didn't have anything to write on. So the nearest thing I had that I pulled out was stationery from my bar mitzvah from years earlier for thank you notes. So it was this tan colored thing with the ribbing on the bottom. It was, and so I wrote down all these questions on my bar mitzvah stationery, and that's what I used as my notes. So I wrote them down as best I could. Again, there's no internet, so it's not like in the few minutes I have between coming home, writing, and then having to go back to school, I couldn't research this. There was no time to go to a library or anything.
Right.
So I did the best that I could, and I went back down there, and I went upstairs into the science building, and there they were filming. And so they were filming The Hunter, like you said, and it was the scene towards the end. I don't want to, alert. I'm going to tell you what happens.
We're all spoilers on my show.
Exactly. It's not too soon. Anyway, so he's looking for his girlfriend who's been kidnapped and brought to a high school where she's been tied up in a science room. And so Steve McQueen knows that she's there and he's looking for her. And so he's in the hallway before he finds her. And so I see him being filmed. He's standing there in the hallway, and I'm behind this crew, because the crew is obviously watching the filming and everything. And so I, as a high school student, I don't want anyone to see me, notice me. I don't want to. So I go behind the crew, and I'm just kind of peering out from behind them. And they say, cut. And all he did was stand there. Like he was just kind of standing, looking around. And they yell, cut. And I think the producer or someone says, this guy's an amazing actor. All he did was stand there, and they're making fun of Steve McQueen right in front of his face from a distance. Anyway, Steve McQueen sees me, and he stops the filming, and he says, all right, come on over here. We're gonna do the interview right now. I'm like, wow. And everyone turns around like, who's this guy? So I forgot what your original question was, but I'm just going to talk. You interrupt me whenever you want to.
Well, I was curious, when you went home and you're with your family and you're thinking about what to ask, what did you start to become nervous at all about talking to him?
I don't remember being very nervous. I remember not being sure what questions to ask.
Right.
I was a novice interviewer. I wouldn't even say I'm a real professional interviewer at this point in my life, even though I've done some. So, I'm thinking, okay, what's your favorite color? Trying to go a little deeper on the questions, which I did a little bit, maybe not a lot.
Did your family have any ideas or? What did they
I,
say?
I don't remember them. I don't remember them contributing anything. I just remember my mom was cooking dinner. My dad had just come home from the hospital where he works. He's a doctor,
Oh,
and so yeah, I think they were thinking, you know what, this is your thing. You do whatever. And
good
I don't
luck.
even think. I'm not even sure anyone realized what this was about to be. I think it was just, oh, there's someone there you're gonna interview,
I
but I
see.
don't. I don't remember.
I see. And so you're sitting down with McQueen, and like it says in the book here, the crew surrounded you because he hadn't done an interview in about a decade, you know, and so they were very very curious. How were you feeling at this point with this audience there?
I think I was probably a little bit nervous at that point because we were in the spotlight there. But I
Right,
had my questions, so I was pretty much reading the questions and trying to naturally continue the conversation as best I could. But, you know, at that stage in my career, which was pre beginning of my career in anything, um, you know, interviewing techniques, understanding how to follow the line of the conversation and not stick to your notes, all that sort of thing was not in my head.
right.
So I could have gone a lot further in what I was doing there if I had a few more years of experience. But I did ask him, for example, one of the first questions was, you know, when was the last time you were interviewed? And he said, oh, like how long's a decade? Like, you don't know how long a decade is? You're a superstar. You don't know what a decade is? So, like, how long is a decade? And someone says 10 years. And he goes, yeah, so it's been like 10 years.
Yeah,
Um, and towards the end of the interview, I said, you know, would you like to say anything to the teachers? And he says, well, this isn't for, you know,
yeah.
the teachers. I go, but the teachers read this also. And he says, yeah, but it's not for the teachers. It's for the students and the young people. And so I tried to kind of follow up a little bit and kind of engage him with some of that. But I also was very well aware that he was in the middle of filming a movie, or so for, you know, how much time was it going to take with everyone kind of sitting around. But yeah, you're right. When he said come on over, I sat down on the steps leading up to the third floor. He sat down at my feet, you know, a couple feet below me, which of course is where he should be, right? No, I'm kidding. It was just weird to be like, Steve McQueen is at my feet. um, and then I looked around and everyone had made a circle on the floor
Oh my
around us
God.
watching this interview because they had probably never seen him interviewed before. And
That's amazing. Were you writing his answers down, or did you ever like a tape recorder?
wouldn't it have been great to have a tape recorder? Yeah. There are a number of things I wish I had thought of after the fact, believe me. No, I did not have a tape recorder with me. I jotted down notes as
Wrote it
fast as
down.
I could,
Yeah,
and I just remembered everything he was saying. I mean, I was just hyper focused on it. So the notes helped me remember, and I wrote them down and remembered. Yeah,
how long did you talk to him?
it was probably roughly 10 or 15 minutes,
10 or
something
yeah,
like that.
10 or 15 minutes. And when did it dawn on you that he gave you the interview, because it's well known how much he liked kids, how much he loved youth, how generous he was with kids. Did you at what point did you realize that was why he granted it to you and not the Rolling Stone magazine or some journalist or something?
Yeah, he had cover stories waiting for him if he would sit down with them.
Yeah.
Rolling Stone, Time, Newsweek. If he agreed, they'd put him on the cover, and he said no to all of them, and he gave me this interview. So it really was an exclusive.
Mm-hmm.
And I only really found out about it, I think, after Marshall Terrell's book on Steve McQueen that you showed came out, because it was at that point that I read about how McQueen, he was no saint.
Right.
He lived his life and he did what he wanted, and there were repercussions from that. But in terms of youth and his difficult
Mm.
childhood,
Yeah.
which is well known and well documented in Marshall's book, that he really felt a fondness for youth and wanted to encourage young people. And for example, I read that when he was filming in different cities, like in Chicago, in the poor areas of Chicago, he would have his publicist or someone bring all these free basketballs to the local court in the park where kids were playing and give it to them. And he didn't want any publicity. He didn't want people to know that he had done that. So I think that it was at that point that I realized, well, he saw this young kid from high school and taking the initiative, and he wanted to reward that. And it was an opportunity. And what does it cost him? It's a few minutes of his time, and turned out to really influence my entire life.
That's incredible. And then you even got some great photographs of him. Was that, did he did hesitate a little bit about that, right? About the pictures?
Yeah. Lauren James was not wrong in that Steve McQueen did not like getting pictures taken of him.
Right.
So we did the interview, and one of the things I just wanted to kind of throw out there also as a continuation of the story is that when I finished the interview, he said, well, do you mind if I add something? Which ever since then, whenever I've interviewed people for any purpose, whether it's for job interviews or other things, I include that question because you never know what they really want to talk about.
Right.
So you ask your questions, and then so he said, well, do you mind if I add something? And it's, of course not. Yes, please do. And he put his arm around me and walked me down this dark hallway away from everybody else. And he started talking about the importance of family and living your life and trusting yourself and living life, doing things in life that make it a meaningful life. So it was a really, really private moment that I had with him. And so after that, as we're walking back down the hall towards the crew, the interview's over, someone comes up behind me. I don't know who it was. And he shoves a black and white 8x10 glossy headshot of Steve McQueen. Not really a headshot. It's a shot from The Hunter, a publicity still. And he says, and he gives me a marker. He says, "Here, get his autograph." So I'm like, okay, Mr. McQueen, can I have your autograph? And he rolls his eyes. Oh, fine. Takes it and signs it, and, annoyed. And then I said, "And can I take your picture?" And he said, fine. I mean, I thought he was going to punch me at this point. So he says, fine. So he stands over by the stairs where we had done the interview. And I have my camera with black and white film. And I quickly take a few pictures. I don't know how long I have. I mean, I shouldn't have worried about the cost of film. I should have just kept taking pictures. And so I shot a few pictures, and that was it.
That's incredible.
I went home.
And you had mentioned, I was listening to you on this radio show you did a number of years ago, that there were photos of the two of you taken, but you're still trying to track those down. Did you ever have any luck?
No. Just before that interview with Mark in the morning, he was part of Mark and Brian on KLOS in Los Angeles, a hugely, hugely popular morning radio show. And then he had his own show a few years later. So he brought me onto that show to be interviewed about the McQueen interview. And at that time, I posted onto Facebook just before the interview, "Hey, I'm going to be on this show. It's kind of cool." And a guy wrote in who was the photographer for the movie. And he said, "Oh, yeah, I remember that. I was on the set with you, and I was there for that interview, and I took pictures." And I thought,
oh, wow.
I wish I had known to hand my camera to someone and say, "Would you take a picture?" But I didn't. I know that now. So I let people know on that interview, on the radio interview, if anyone out there is connected to the movie industry and might have access to those pictures, they might be at Paramount now. One of my life's goals has been to find the picture that he took of me with Steve McQueen, because it was such a pivotal point in my life, and I have not found that yet. I'm still trying to get into Paramount. I have not tried super hard, but I've left some messages. Nothing came back. But I know that it's there. But I also heard that the photo is probably buried under millions of other negatives or pictures. and who knows where it is.
Yeah.
So I'm sending word out right now again. Anyone at
Yes.
Paramount or might have a
Anyone
way in
who
for.
go
I'll
ahead,
look for
sorry.
the pictures. I will dig through the piles myself.
Well, yeah, we'll send you and a few people in the archive department and just go through the
I had one idea that if Hamilton High School, where I went to school, where I got the interview, if they still have any sort of journalism class, which we had at the time, I'd love to send in some of their reporters today and have
yeah.
them have the project of finding that picture. Wouldn't that be a really interesting full circle?
Oh God, yeah, that would be incredible. Well, I hope one day that you get them because that would be really special for you. And so once you this comes out in the newspaper in your school, how did that attract how did others find out about it in order to ask you how you got him?
Believe it or not, I had to fight to get the article included in the
Oh
newspaper
my God, wow. Why was that a fight?
because it was only a 4-page newspaper,
I
and
see.
and the space was spoken for. There was a book review. There was, this was the entertainment page, so there was already a book review and various other things. And I remember arguing with the guy who wrote the book review that it could either be his book review or it could be an exclusive interview with one of the biggest superstars of the
Mm,
day. And I literally was arguing with him, trying to convince him and the advisor, Mr. George Hedges, who I remember fondly, saying, "This is an exclusive. We can do the book review another day." You know,
yeah.
when I was in the class, I got to school and I had the journalism class, and there was a telephone in the class, and the phone rings, and it's it's Warren Cowan. So Rogers and Cowan was the biggest PR firm agency in the world at the time, based in Beverly Hills, and they represented Steve McQueen. So it was Rogers and Cowan. Cowan calls me at school, the founder of the firm, and he says, "Did you interview Steve McQueen?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "I've been trying to get him to do an interview for years. Cover stories, this, that, the other thing. He won't do it. How did you get his interview?" And I said, "I asked." And he said, "Well, when this comes out, you have to bring this publication into my office. I need to see this thing." And so a few weeks later, it got printed, and I came to his office, and he just grabs it out of my hands. He was the nicest guy, and he's looking at, "This is unbelievable. Hey, come in here." And he starts calling his whole staff in. "This kid got Steve McQueen's interview," and
It's
so
incredible.
it was a lot of fun.
Oh my
But
God.
but but most people, I don't think most people even knew about it. In fact, when I had my typed in, it was typed at the time on paper. I wrote up the interview and I dropped it casually on my advisor's desk, on the teacher's desk. And it was kind of like a joke. "Oh, and here's a story that you might be interested in." He didn't look at it for a week.
Oh my God.
It was a week. Every day I kept saying, "Have you read the interview?" "Nah, I've been busy." Like,
Sitting on a
"Oh,
gold mine.
I'm lucky it got in."
That's incredible. And you shared an article just before we started recording that someone had wrote about this, the fact that you had scored this interview with him. Who was that?
The Philadelphia Inquirer wrote a piece about it. It was a news item. It got into Tiger Beat magazine, which I'm still looking for that issue. A little blurb about it. They did publicity about it, at Rogers and Cowan, and so it got
Oh, I
into a lot
see.
of
Okay.
newspapers. And
I see.
I'd still love to see any of the clips from that sort of thing. But in terms of the school, I'm not sure anyone was really very aware of it. Although we did get his picture in the yearbook as the head of some fake group, school group that we had there. So we would do these jokey things on the yearbook staff, and Steve McQueen was the supervisor for the such and such. I think it was the Heaven and Hell group. Or I don't remember which one it was, but we got him in there. So.
That's incredible. Do you remember how you reacted to his death? Because he died just about a year after this, right? Do you remember how you reacted to that?
I was shocked. I found out about it when I opened up the LA Times. that next morning, and his picture was the front cover, and that was the front page story that he had died.
Hmm.
And I was shocked because he was a young guy. I think he was only about 50.
Yeah.
And it's very strange for me in the last decade to realize I'm older now than he was when he passed away, because I looked at him as, this is an older guy, which
Right.
of course every high school student does for anyone over the age of about 21.
Mm.
But I called the LA Times right away, and I spoke to someone there, and I said, "Are you interested in stories? Because I actually interviewed Steve McQueen last year." And they said, "No, thanks, we're good."
Oh, really?
And
Oh,
so nothing got in. And then, actually, you know what? I'm remembering as I talk about that. I think I found out about it the day that he died, not the next morning when I saw it in the newspaper. So I heard about it, I guess, on the radio, and I called the LA Times, and they said, "No, thanks." And the next day, I opened up the LA Times front page story about Steve McQueen, and the most recent quote they had from him was 10 years earlier.
oh, really? That's it. Wow. I'm really, that's odd. Why they wouldn't want to talk to you? That's really, really, really,
I don't
really
know.
strange. Huh. It's just one of those
Yeah.
things, I guess.
There
Um,
were a number of kind of close calls like that could have been. That was one of them. I found out I was reached out to by a representative or an author journalist, I guess, from Time Magazine, and at the time they had their People section as the last page of the magazine. It wasn't, I think, a full magazine at that point. I think People magazine came from their last page in Time Magazine, if I recall correctly. It could have been Newsweek. I'm just not remembering. But they said, "We want to put you into this People newsmakers thing about how you did this into the magazine." I thought, wow, that's great. And then she went on vacation, and then there was the hostage crisis in the Middle East, and the story got bumped. And once it's been bumped, you can't bring it
mm,
back. And she wasn't there to fight for it. So
ah,
I missed my opportunity to be in a major news magazine. Oh well.
ah, that's a shame. But this is such a great, story, which at least fortunately is you're telling it. And again, it's in this book. If anyone wants to read by Marshall Terrell, how did Marshall find out about this?
That's another funny story. This whole thing is filled with funny stories,
Right.
and I hope you'll give me a moment to, when we're done, to tell you what happened afterwards in the subsequent years. There were a couple of funny stories there
Oh, sure.
too.
Yes.
um, so I was sitting in my apartment one evening, a few years after I graduated. I might have been at UCLA at the time, and I get a phone call, and I answer, and someone says, "Hi, is this Rick Kraus?" It was Kraus at the time. I said, "Yeah." He said, "Did you go to Hamilton High School?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Did you interview Steve McQueen?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, I'm writing a book about Steve McQueen, and I was just talking to his stunt double for my book." And he said, "There was this kid on the set who came up to me and who interviewed Steve McQueen." So I thought, you know what? I got to find this guy. And it was Marshall Terrell. And so I said, "Yeah, I did." He says, "Well, the book is on press right now. It's done, it's on press, but I want to stop the presses and I want to get your interview in the book." And I don't think I've ever heard anyone actually say "stop the presses." I've seen it in the movies, but apparently
Yeah.
it is said sometimes. And so that's what he did. He stopped it and he interviewed me, and he put it into his book, and then into subsequent books of his, because he's written a few on Steve McQueen. He is the expert on Steve McQueen.
Oh, I didn't know he had more than one book on McQueen. I'll have to look that up because yeah, this is a great. I read it a number of years ago, but this is a really really great biography on McQueen. And then you also shared this great story that once this book came out, people started to recognize you. Is that right? Like it started, you be at like a hardware store or something.
Yeah, I don't want to claim that I am a recognizable celebrity. Let us not. I in no way am claiming that. But there have been funny things that have happened. Um, I was working in an art department at the time few years after that, and I was in charge of buying art supplies for the art department, wax and X-Acto knives and bores, whatever it was at the time. And so I went down to the store and, I'd buy them with my own money and then get reimbursed by the company. So I went down there and there was a young guy helping me out, figuring out where to get the stuff. And we went to ring up everything at the cash register and I hand him my credit card. And I don't know this guy. I've seen him a couple of times. I hand him my credit card. He looks at it and he says, "Did you interview Steve McQueen?" I said, "You have got to be kidding me. How could you possibly know that I interviewed Steve McQueen?" He says, "Well, I'm reading this book about Steve McQueen. And he said there was this kid named Rick." And
That's incredible.
It's been really funny. And that's happened a number of times. There was an art show nearby in Santa Monica at a graduate school for art. And I went there one evening for the open house and looking at all the galleries, and the artists were there in each gallery. And I walk into this one room and it's huge canvas portraits of Steve McQueen. Like each one it might even have been the same portrait that he treated differently. And each one's, I don't remember, 4 or 5 feet square. They're huge. And this artist is standing there and I'm looking at this artwork, admiring it. And I said, "Excuse me, I have to just tell you, just to let you know that I actually interviewed Steve McQueen. So it's really interesting to see your artwork." And he says, "You're the guy who interviewed Steve McQueen. I read about you." So I still get that. And it's fun.
That is so incredible. And you had mentioned that this had really changed, really made a major impact on your life. What was it? Was it because, as you said, just taking that opportunity to simply ask when you want something, or how did it affect you so much?
Well, part of it was being adventurous and asking for things and doing things and not worrying about failing or what the response might be. And I know that philosophy is a common philosophy that healthy, psychologically healthy people, tell people.
Right.
Don't let these things get in the way, right? So it's not a unique idea, but to have gone through something like this that continues to this day because of him, not because of me, but because of him and who he was and his cult status as someone who I think accurately lived life for the most part the way he wanted to live it and do and not put up with things and all that. You don't have to maybe go as fully far as he did in some areas, but that is I think a good philosophy. So that's affected me. And what's also affected me, I think probably even more so, is the idea of doing good and helping others as he did for me. He did something for me. It wasn't for him. He didn't need the publicity, but he knew that this would be meaningful to me in some way, which it of course was.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been very active over the years with my son, leading Cub Scouts and involved with Boy Scouts when he was in that organization. I volunteer regularly at a hospital in Los Angeles where I perform on guitar for patients and staff. I've been doing that for roughly 14 years or so, which is the most rewarding non-paying job I've ever had, to go into a hospital and play some music, and people who are suffering, their suffering disappears for the time that you're playing. I've been in places where people are asking for morphine when I walk in and I play a song and they say, "I don't need the morphine anymore because I'm not in pain right now."
Oh,
So
wow.
it's an incredibly powerful feeling to give back, to volunteer. And just as a side note, if any of your viewers out there, you know, are wondering about volunteering anywhere, and just in my example, it's at the hospital, but there are musicians out there who they're sitting at home playing by themselves, practicing, singing songs by themselves. Well, you know what? You can get into a hospital, do the exact same thing,
Yeah.
sit in someone's room and play and practice right there, and you'll actually be doing a huge amount of good. So that sort of thing, and just looking for ways to help and to volunteer and to help out the community, which I do. I might have done it otherwise, even without having interviewed him. But whenever I do, I think back on that interview and how he allowed me into his life for a little while.
Wow, that's incredible. And I know that you are also you've been working on a book. So have you continued to write throughout the years?
Yeah, I've written a few books. They're usually humor. One of them, the first one, and I've worked at book publishing companies because that's what I do. I do graphic design and I
Yeah.
specialize in many ways in book cover design.
Yeah, I
I've
was looking at
done
your website. There's
hundreds.
some incredible uh designs that you've done. Just it was really, really and some of the painting as well, right?
Thank you. Yeah, so I do
Yeah.
a lot of creative stuff. I
Yeah.
do graphic design, I do photography, illustration, video editing, and a lot of writing. So the first book that I wrote with my girlfriend at the time, now wife, was called The Desk Book, which was an illustrated humor book of hypothetical desks. So what does Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's desk look like, and Anne Frank's desk, and so they're all meant to be funny, goofy, and there's a play on them, as you'll see if you ever read the book, which of course you won't because it's out of stock,
Ah.
out of print, but it did go to a second printing, I'm proud to say. And then I wrote another one during COVID because what else is there to do besides write a book, right? Or do
Mm-hmm.
podcasts.
Yeah. That's
So
how this started.
so just before the election, for the year before the 2020 election, when Trump was really, doing his thing, um, I and others of my persuasion were hoping that he would be losing the election and thought that he most likely would lose the election. So I wrote and illustrated and self-published a book called Why I Lost the 2020 Presidential Election. It Wasn't My Fault, Donald Trump's List of Excuses. So
Oh, that's a great idea.
let me
Oh,
see
I'll
if you
have to
can,
check
there you
that out.
go.
Oh my God, that's
There
a
you go.
great idea.
And it's basically reasons why he lost, and it's his reasons, allegedly,
I love it.
humorously, of course. It was because not enough Mexicans voted for him, because not enough of this, that. It's because, and he has all these excuses that he wrote up before the election because he knew he wouldn't have time afterwards to come up
Right.
with a full list of excuses. So it was just a lark, a funny thing. And then I'm currently writing a memoir, which I'm planning on having published, I hope, in 2023.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I'll have to check those out for sure. I wanted to touch on the getaway a little bit because we were discussing of a McQueen film to look at, and so you hadn't seen this one before, right? This is your first time checking it out.
Yeah, I have not seen a lot of Steve McQueen films, to tell you the
That's
truth.
that's interesting. Yeah, I don't know why I just assumed that you were some major, you know, that
Wait, because I
fan.
bumped into this guy?
Yeah.
Because I bumped into this guy, suddenly I'm going to see all his movies?
Run out and 1979 and check out everything.
I'm not Marshall Terrell, okay?
Yeah.
I'm just some guy who bumped into a famous guy.
I misjudged, I suppose. So what did you think? It's not my favorite of his, but it's enjoyable. So I was curious what you thought of it.
I enjoyed it. I always find it interesting that when you watch an old movie and you see the nature of the editing and the nature of the quality of the film that was used and the graininess of it and all the things that were going on then, but then were changed because of how movies progressed to today, where it's so slick and everything's so action. And so
Yeah.
when I watch, and that also applies to the scripts and this and how quickly things move along. So when I watch a movie like this, I can't help but feel like, wow, this is so dated, because obviously it's a long time ago, but it's also really interestingly done with the way it was Sam Peckinpah, right, who
Yeah.
directed it.
Peck and Paul directed this one. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of violence, just a little, uh,
Yeah. Not as much
but
as
I
Wild Bunch, but there is for
which
sure.
which I don't think I've seen. So I'm going to be watching that with my son because I
Yeah, that's
he's
a
into
great one.
he's into westerns and violence, and when he heard that, he said, "Let's watch that one."
Perfect.
But yeah, so I watched it. And I really enjoyed how he cut back and forth. He came zooming in close on certain things, especially in the opening scenes when he's in prison, and then
Yeah.
he would cut to later when he's out of prison or before prison, maybe it was. So I found that really interesting, and I thought the story was good.
I'm glad that you brought up the opening, because that to me was the best part of the film, because they told everything that this guy was experiencing, visually. Like, clearly he's in prison, and these flashes of him and his wife, played by Ali McGraw. He's thinking about her, and then the noises from those machines. He's in, like, he was working in like a factory setting in the prison. It was just so anxiety driven and stressful, and he's doing all this hard labor, and he's in his cell, and then he has that scene with Ali McGraw where he's like, go tell that corrupt guy with political ties to get me out of here, because he's denied parole. And sure enough, he is. But I like that so much, because they did the whole thing visually. It's a simple story. I mean, I'm usually not I'm a big fan of plot heavy films, but this one it's enjoyable. It didn't do very. I mean, sorry, I should say it did very well in the box office when it came out, but the critics didn't really care for it until years later. Now people look at it more fondly, but it's quite heavy on plot. But to me, it was much more about this love story with him and Ali McGraw, and sort of how their relationship was tested so often. First of all, he was away from her for so many years, and obviously that leads a strain. And then she slept with that guy in order to get him out of prison, which he didn't know about until later. So they're constantly tested throughout the film. At one point, he almost leaves. When they get out of the garbage, when they get trapped in the garbage at one point, and thrown into a dump when they were on the run, and then he almost breaks it off at that point. So they're going through this adventure where they come through together in the end. I was curious if that love story popped out to you at all. Did you think that was effective in the film?
Well, I enjoyed that part of it, and I enjoyed how the director spends more time than you would expect on their faces and their reactions. And
Yeah,
it's not just a boom, boom, say something and then the other person says something. Um, but I also felt like I saw very little humor or lightness in their relationship.
that's true.
It was just a heavy,
Yeah,
heavy relationship, and I think that's just part of the style of the movie. That type
yeah.
of movie is heavy. They're not telling jokes. There was a little bit of humor. I forget which one, but there were a couple of points where I kind of smiled and I thought, boy, it would have been nice if they had added a little more of that into this movie.
Yeah,
But I,
yeah, that's a good point. You would have probably saw that in more like the classic Hollywood films, those sort of couple on the run, like some of those Hitchcock ones. They were more humorous. But yeah, you're right. This is a very
yeah,
serious
and I
action
like,
film.
and I always like watching Ali McGraw in movies, and going back to my interview with Steve McQueen and what happened afterwards. Years later. I was at Wolfgang Puck's up on Sunset, I think, and I sat down with some friends, and someone says, "Did you see who's seated behind you?" And I turn around, and Ali McGraw is
Oh
sitting there
wow.
with a friend of hers, I guess, having dinner. And I collect autographs, which will be a whole other topic of conversation sometimes. I get autographs of famous people, celebrities, authors, artists, that sort of thing, politicians, anyone who means something to me, either in a famous or infamous way. And so I do a drawing of them when I see them, and then I have them autograph it and write what they think of my drawing.
Oh, that's a
So
great
I've got
idea.
hundreds of these with
Oh my
people's
god.
writing about what they thought, which often is, you made my nose too big, you didn't give me enough hair, but it doesn't matter. It's still interesting. And some of them are movie directors, like Billy Wilder. So we'll have to talk
Oh
about that
wow.
later.
I love
But
Wilder.
anyway, so they said, she's right there. You should talk to her. And I said, I don't want to talk to her. She's with someone. She's having dinner. I don't want to bother her. But as the evening went on, I thought, I really should say hi. So as we finished up, I turned around and I went over to her and I said, "Excuse me, I don't mean to bother you, but I just had to say, I just wanted to let you know, I actually interviewed Steve McQueen. And I just thought, and she goes, "You're the guy who interviewed Steve McQueen. I remember he came home and he told me this kid had interviewed him and we talked about it." And she wanted me to
I
send
love
her
how
all
she
the
even know. That's great. She even knew
packet
about
of
it.
packet of materials. Send me the interview and send me the pictures, and I want to see. And so I did, and so yeah, it just has continued through the years. But it's always cool seeing her, especially when she was younger in these classic movies.
This is where they met and, quickly fell in love. And she was married to Robert Evans, who was the head of Paramount, and they had just had a child. And here she was. And, they got into this intense relationship. And then, as got married. But I was watching an interview with her just last night because they had shown this at the Turner Classic Movies Film Festival last year, and she said she didn't even know what she was doing. Like, this was like at the beginning of her career, and she was been turned into this major star because of Love Story that came out in the previous year. So they put her with McQueen. And she said the scene where he gets out of prison and you see her getting out of the car and approaching him. She was still kind of saying, "Oh my God, that's Steve McQueen," like a fan. And here she is as the leading lady. But she apparently did not like her performance at all in this. But I thought she was quite good. I don't know how you felt about her.
I come back to my point about how it felt like a heavy relationship. It felt a little over the top for both of them. I mean, they're both very good actors, of course. Um, and again, I'm not a fan of every type of movie and
Right.
noir movies. Is that how you pronounce it? Noir.
Yeah, film
Um,
noir.
I'm not. I'm not a big fan of that kind of thing and others. So, I was watching this, appreciating it, but thinking, I wouldn't want to watch it again, or it's not always the style. But
Yeah.
6 Degrees of Separation. Robert Evans, of course, like you said, was married to Ally MacGraw, and I worked on the design of one of Robert Evans' books,
Oh.
which the kid stays in the picture, one of the versions of
Oh
that,
wow. Yeah, I love that
and
book.
and then he was working on another one that I designed. I don't recall if it ever got published, but I
Oh,
ended
the
up going
sequel
to.
to it. There's like a sequel
It
to that.
might have been. It
Yeah.
might have been. And I ended up. He invited me to his home up in Bel Air, and so I went into Robert Evans' home and was just like this. Uh, and he was lying on his bed in his bathrobe, and we talked about the cover. But so this it's interesting, the connection. I was thinking, should I bring up Miss Steve McQueen? I don't think so.
That's so,
But
yeah, that's incredible.
I heard from a good friend of mine just the other day who is an expert in movies. He's a writer, had a cult hit years ago, and has continued to do a lot of great writing. He was telling me that he heard that Ally MacGraw was getting in touch with Robert Evans during the filming of The Getaway, saying, "Come on over, come down and spend some time with me during the shooting." And according to my friend, he thinks maybe The Godfather was going on at that time and preparing for that movie, which was a Robert Evans movie. And so he kept saying, "Nah, I'm busy with The Godfather." Well, look what happens. You end up losing your wife.
Yes.
so,
Yeah.
so I don't know
I,
if that's a true story, but I trust my friend, or maybe it's close to the truth.
and I like the opening scene, that they didn't just kind of jump into bed with each other, even though they hadn't seen each other in 4 years. It was like awkward at first as they're sitting on the bed and they slowly are trying to become reacquainted with each other. I mean, he literally stops at a certain point, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. A guy coming out of prison. What would it be like when the first time you sleep with your wife after not seeing her for so many years? And then later when he finds out that she slept with Ben Johnson in order to get him out of prison, which was not part of the deal he was aware of, that they were going to sleep together. When he was kind of smacking her around outside of the car, I forgot about that scene. I was quite that was quite abusive, and he kind of was pacing back and forth, getting in and out of the car as he's trying to figure out, well, what the hell are we going to do? But it's quite clever how there are some plot holes for sure. I mean, for one thing, once Al Lettieri, who people would probably know most from The Godfather, He's in this as the guy who tries to kill McQueen, and then McQueen shoots him first, and he had that vest on, bulletproof vest. It occurred to me, I'm not sure if it did for you. I was like, well, how did he know where McQueen was going? You know, because he knew where he was gonna go, that he was gonna go to El Paso in this hotel where this guy kind of protects common criminals. And everyone seemed to know where everyone was going to go. I was kind of like, okay, that's a little too convenient.
It's almost like they all read the same script.
Yeah, exactly. And even when they were planning the bank robbery, some critics had mentioned this as well. I don't know, you know, McQueen and MacGraw seemed to think as they were going to be robbing some major bank, you know, and they were like planning explosives and you know, exploding some big barn and all this kind of, and I was like, what are they doing? And you even saw Lettieri was like, this is just an easy job, you know. It's like a little local bank, like you see out in Bonnie and Clyde. Just go in there and put a gun to them. So I'm not really, you know, I don't know if that was meant to be humorous or not. It didn't really work as funny.
Yeah, but it worked in perfectly for a Sam Peckinpah movie, though.
Exactly.
What can we blow up? What can we shoot up?
Yeah.
You know, there's a barn down the road. Let's blow that up.
Yeah, it makes me wonder. I'm like, were they trying to focus on some humor here? Like even the fact that later on she gets conned out of Richard Bright ends up conning her when she's putting the bag in the locker, and then he's like, "Oh, let me hand you with that," and then you know, now she lost the bag, and then he has to go. It actually could have worked as like a action comedy, maybe in the hands of Hitchcock or someone. He would have found that light touch.
I felt like there were some elements of What's Up, Doc, with the missing bag, and then them trying to find the bag, and
yeah,
you know, there was that.
Yeah.
But I think my favorite one of my favorite elements of the whole movie was the Sally Struthers character.
Oh yeah. That was so crazy.
That took me by surprise. I assume this was before her All in the Family days.
Yeah, just before, I think. Yeah,
and her playing basically a sweet little girlfriend turned slut just cracked me up, and it was so over the top. I mean, she sees the gun, and man, she just falls for this terrible guy.
Yeah, she's like stroking the gun like she was attracted to his violence, and it was disturbing at the same time because that poor husband of hers is then tied up, and it's implied that he had to like watch them have sex, or something along those lines, and then he ends up, you know, hanging himself. It's like it was so disturbing, but at the same time darkly comical.
Yeah, well, it felt, for a lot of it, both the outfits, the big mustaches.
Oh my God, yeah.
And how she turns on a dime. You know, it felt like for a few minutes at least I was watching a porn movie, because I mean, it was just like a 1970s porn movie with the music coming in and the guy tied up and the wife realizing, oh, the bad guy is actually who I want. And oh man, so it was a real mix of stuff in the movie, but I'm glad I had the excuse to watch it before being on your show.
Yeah, the more I discuss it, it's actually seeming, you know, more and more ridiculous in a lot of ways. I wonder if, because I don't know if you read this, but Peter Bogdanovich, who directed What's Up, Doc, was supposed to direct this. So I wonder if he would have found more humor in it. And apparently he wanted to do this and What's Up, Doc, in the studio. It said it's too much. You got to pick. And McQueen apparently was really pissed off at him because McQueen wanted him. And then they wound up going with Peckinpah, because he had just worked with Peckinpah on a really interesting character study of a film called Junior Bonner, which was just before this. And Peckinpah needed a hit because, as McQueen said, that was the only film that McQueen starred in that made no money. But it's really, really good. I agree with you. This is enjoyable. I don't think I would watch it again. I have only seen it once before, and I remember thinking it was all right. And those are still my feelings. It's enjoyable. It's action packed. It's definitely worth seeing, but it's ultimately not the best in the McQueen filmography, in my view.
So what do you think is the best McQueen film or the best couple if you've seen a bunch?
I think the best film he did, in my view, is probably Papillon with Dustin Hoffman.
I saw
Uh,
that a long time ago, and I'd love to see it again. But
it's
yeah, I
great.
remember really enjoying that.
Yeah, and he gave a great performance. He went all out in that performance. You didn't see him give such a, because he was capable of it. I mean, he was a really good actor. He just kind of played a certain type often, but that's wonderful. Bullet is great. I love Bullet, and the other one he did with Natalie Wood, Love Is a Proper Stranger. I don't know if you've seen that one.
No, not
That's
yet.
a really, really good. And Junior Bonner. I did see The Hunter. I'll have to see it again. The film that they shot here when you met him. That was his last one. I've seen it, so I'd have to check it out. I remember enjoying it. Did you ever get a chance to see it?
Yeah, I've seen it. It was light. You
Yeah,
know, there was more humor in it, but I'm glad that there was more humor to it. It was action packed. Um, you know,
yeah,
it was fine. It was fine. I look at it fondly.
yeah. No, I
You know,
bet.
I freeze the frame on the DVD. That's see where he's going into the room. That's where he stopped the filming.
Yeah, I was there.
My family goes, yeah, we know, we know. I give them credit for hearing the story more
That's
than once.
great. I love it. Well, Rick, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come on and sharing this incredible story of interviewing and meeting Steve McQueen, and talking about the Getaway as well. Again, if anyone wants to read the interview, you can read it in this great book, Portrait of an American Rebel by Marshall Terrell. Is it on a website anywhere, or is it only in this book for people to, if they want to read it?
Is what on a web is the interview
The
itself on a
interview.
website?
Yeah.
If you do it, yeah, it is on a few websites. If you do a search for Steve McQueen's last interview, um, or my last name at the time, which was Kraus, Kraus, there are interviews. I've been interviewed for websites, and then they include that interview also. So it's there. It's not a super long interview, but it gives you a sense of what was going on for him.
Great. Okay, great.
Thanks a lot
Well,
for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
thank you so much, everyone, for watching and or listening. If you are currently listening to this on the audio version of the podcast and you've run out of episodes to listen to, head over to the YouTube channel where every single episode that I've ever recorded can be found, youtube.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies. I also want to thank all of my members on Patreon. If you're interested in becoming a member of my Patreon, head over to the link, patreon.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies for full details. Patreon is a membership where you will receive exclusive bonus content created by me. All of the content that I create on Patreon is based on polls that I put out at the beginning of every single month, which means that you will be very much a part of the decision making as to what I do on Patreon month in and month out. So head over to the link for full details. And lastly, if this is your first time here on my YouTube channel, please consider subscribing by pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the movies logo. You will see it floating above my head in the top left corner to your top left in just a second. Just click on that and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release one of my new episodes or when I go live. Thank you so much, everyone. I will see you in the next episode.